Clara Holloway wasn't always chasing shadows. There was a time not so long ago when she chased headlines. Pulitzers, even. Her beat was investigative journalism, hard-hitting, gritty, real, exposing corruption, giving a voice to the voiceless. She thrived on the adrenaline rush of a good story, the thrill of the chase. Then came the whispers, the nightmares that bled into her waking hours, the feeling of unseen eyes watching her every move. It started subtly like a draft in a locked room, a chill down her spine that lingered a little too long. A name whispered in the dead of night, a name she didn't recognize but felt drawn to. Clara tried to ignore it at first, tried to rationalize it away. Stress, she told herself, overwork. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, the nightmares more vivid, more terrifying. They followed her from her dreams into her waking hours, blurring the lines of reality. That's when she knew. This wasn't just in her head, something was reaching out to her, something dark and hungry. Blackwood Manor. Even the name sent shivers down her spine. A Gothic monstrosity perched precariously on a windswept cliff overlooking the churning Atlantic. It had stood there for centuries, a silent sentinel to countless tragedies. Whispers of murder, madness, and suicide clung to its crumbling facade like cobwebs. Local legend painted a grim picture of the manor's past. It was said to have been built by a wealthy merchant who made his fortune in the slave trade. A curse followed him home from the high seas, a curse that claimed the lives of his wife and children within the manor's cold, unforgiving walls. Driven mad by grief, the merchant took his own life, his final desperate act forever staining the manor's soul. Over the centuries, Blackwood Manor changed hands many times, but the curse remained. Each new owner met a tragic end, their stories adding to the manor's grim legacy. The whispers grew louder, the shadows deeper. The manor became a void, a black hole of sorrow and despair, swallowing the light and hope of anyone foolish enough to cross its threshold. Clara knew the stories. She had devoured every scrap of information she could find about Blackwood Manor. Newspaper clippings yellowed with age, dusty court documents, faded photographs that hinted at unspeakable horrors. The more she learned, the more she felt an irresistible pull towards the manor, as if some unseen force was drawing her in. She tried to resist, to convince herself it was madness, that the whispers, the nightmares were just her imagination running wild. But deep down she knew the truth. Something was waiting for her at Blackwood Manor, something that had been calling to her for longer than she realized. Tonight she would answer that call. Tonight, Clara Holloway would face her fears and step into the darkness that awaited her at Blackwood Manor. She would confront the whispers, unravel the secrets, and pray that she wouldn't become another victim of its haunted legacy. It was a fool's errand, she knew, but some stories are too powerful to resist, some calls too insistent to ignore. And Clara Holloway, for better or worse, was never one to back down from a challenge, even one that promised to consume her whole. The old iron gates of Blackwood Manor loomed before her, twisted and gnarled like the skeletal fingers of some monstrous hand reaching out from the earth. They groaned open, as if in protest, the sound echoing through the stillness of the night like a death rattle. Clara's headlights, cutting through the oppressive darkness, painted grotesque shadows that danced and writhed on the gravel driveway. The wind, howling in from the sea, whipped her hair around her face, carrying with it the salty tang of the ocean and something else, something ancient and cold. It whispered through the gnarled branches of the trees that lined the drive, their silhouettes twisted and contorted like figures from a nightmare reaching out to snatch her into their embrace. The closer she got, the heavier the atmosphere grew. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. It was as if the very essence of Blackwood Manor was resisting her presence, warning her to turn back before it was too late. But Clara was not one to be deterred. She'd come too far, faced too many of her own demons to be frightened off by shadows and whispers. She parked the car at the foot of the grand, decaying staircase leading to the manor's entrance, its once gleaming white stone now stained with age and neglect. Taking a deep breath, she steeled herself for what lay ahead. The silence was the first thing that struck her. Not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping world, but an oppressive, heavy silence, like the moment after a scream has been choked off. It was a silence that listened, that watched. Clara shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. The massive oak door creaked open, revealing an abyss of darkness within. Stepping across the threshold, Clara felt a chill race down her spine, as if she had just stepped into a tomb. The air inside was stale and cold, thick with the dust of ages and the lingering scent of decay. She shone her flashlight around the grand foyer, its former glory now faded and forgotten. Cobwebs hung from every corner, and dust lay thick on the once ornate furniture. The grandfather clock stood frozen in time, its hands pointing accusingly at the stroke of midnight. As if on cue, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the manor, bouncing off the high ceilings and disappearing down dark corridors. Clara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. It had sounded so real, so close. Had it come from within these walls, or from the depths of her own imagination? Taking a shaky breath, she gripped her flashlight tighter, her finger hovering over the on switch. There was something deeply unsettling about this place, something that sent shivers down her spine and made her skin crawl. She started with the grand staircase, its once polished wood now warped and creaking underfoot. Each step she took released a chorus of groans and sighs, as if the old house itself was lamenting its fate. Shadows danced and flickered at the edge of her flashlight beam, playing tricks on her already frayed nerves. The upper floor was a labyrinth of dark corridors and dusty rooms, each one seemingly colder and more oppressive than the last. The air was heavy with the weight of forgotten memories of lives lived and lost within these walls. Clara could almost feel the echoes of their sorrow clinging to the air, whispering tales of tragedy and despair. In one room she found a child's nursery, its rocking horse frozen mid-gallop, a porcelain doll lying discarded on the floor, its painted eyes staring blankly into the darkness. In another, a grand library with shelves lined with leather-bound books, their pages filled with forgotten knowledge. But it was the master bedroom at the end of the hallway that drew her in, its door slightly ajar, beckoning her closer. As she pushed the door open, a musty scent wafted out, mingled with the faint aroma of lavender, as if someone had recently tried to mask the stench of decay. The four-poster bed dominated the room, its heavy velvet curtains drawn shut, casting eerie shadows that danced in the dim light. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes followed her every move, and the whispers she had tried so hard to ignore seemed closer now, more insistent, swirling around her like the dust motes dancing in the beam of her flashlight. Clara stepped cautiously into the master bedroom, her flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. Dust motes danced in the stale air, swirling like tiny ghosts disturbed from their slumber. The heavy velvet curtains, drawn shut against the night, seemed to absorb the light, creating an abyss of shadow at the far end of the room. The whispers started almost immediately, faint at first, like the rustling of leaves just beyond the range of hearing. But as Clara moved deeper into the room, they grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, as if the house itself were trying to speak to her. She pressed her ear against the cold, damp plaster, straining to make sense of the whispers. Fragments of words, disjointed phrases, none of them making any sense, but there was a distinct feeling of malice behind them, a sense of anger and despair that sent shivers crawling down her spine. Clara pulled away, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the whispers were meant to lure her deeper into the darkness, to a place where she might never be found. Section 2. The Lady in White. Clara turned from the whispering wall, her flashlight beam sweeping across the room, searching for the source of the voices. That's when she saw her, a figure standing in the far corner, shrouded in shadow, a wisp of white gossamer floating around her like a shroud. The figure turned slowly, its face obscured by the darkness. Clara gasped, her breath catching in her throat. The figure was tall and slender, its form draped in a long, flowing white gown. Even from this distance, Clara could sense the sadness emanating from the figure, a palpable aura of grief and despair. Clara took a step back, her hand trembling as she raised the flashlight, its beam illuminating the figure's face. Or rather, what should have been a face, where there should have been eyes. There was only darkness, two empty sockets staring back at her, and the mouth, a gaping hole frozen in a silent scream. The Lady in White, as she was known in local legends, stood motionless, her spectral form seeming to flicker and sway in the dim light. Clara could feel the air grow colder, the silence in the room deepening, as if the very atmosphere were holding its breath, bracing for something terrible to happen. Section 3. The Shadow Doppelganger. The Lady in White glided toward Clara, her movements fluid and effortless, as if she were floating just above the ground. Clara stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind screaming at her to run, to escape while she still could. But her feet felt rooted to the spot, her body paralyzed by a primal fear that seemed to claw its way up from the depths of her subconscious. The Lady in White stopped just inches from Clara, her empty sockets boring into her soul. Clara wanted to scream, to cry out, but no sound escaped her lips. Then, from the corner of her eye, Clara saw something that chilled her to the bone. A dark shape had detached itself from the shadows in the far corner of the room. It moved with an unnatural grace, mimicking Clara's own hesitant steps. A macabre reflection come to life. As it crept closer, she could make out its form. It was her, or rather a twisted, shadowy doppelganger of herself. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and a cruel smirk twisted its lips into a grotesque mockery of her own. The Lady in White reached out a spectral hand, her touch sending a jolt of icy fear through Clara's body. Clara closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable, but the touch never came. Instead, she heard a blood-curdling scream, a sound of pure terror that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. Section 4. Trapped. Clara opened her eyes to see the Lady in White vanish into thin air, her form dissolving into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared. The shadowy doppelganger, however, remained. Now bathed in the beam of Clara's flashlight, it stood between her and the bedroom door, its features contorted in a mask of pure hatred. Panic surged through Clara. She was trapped, hunted by something she didn't understand and couldn't fight. The air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe, as if the very life force of the room was being sucked away. The temperature plummeted, and the scent of damp earth and decay filled her nostrils, choking her. She spun around, searching for another way out, but every exit seemed to have vanished. The room was no longer a sanctuary, but a prison, its walls closing in on her, suffocating her. The shadowy figure advanced slowly, its eyes never leaving hers, a predator toying with its prey. A wave of dizziness washed over Clara, and she stumbled back against the wall, her hand frantically searching for a weapon, anything to defend herself with. But there was nothing, only the cold, unforgiving stone at her back and the chilling realization that she was completely alone at the mercy of whatever dark forces were at play within the cursed walls of Blackwood Manor. The room seemed to warp around Clara. What were once straight walls twisted and pulsed with a grotesque life of their own. The wallpaper, a faded floral print, morphed into screaming faces, their eyes following her every move. The air itself crackled with a malevolent energy, pressing down on her, suffocating her. Her shadow self moved closer, its form solidifying, taking on a horrifying mockery of her own features. Its eyes, burning like hot coals, held a chilling intelligence, a cruel amusement at her terror. Clara's breath came in ragged gasps, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She was trapped in a nightmare, a waking horror from which there seemed to be no escape. Desperation clawed at her throat. This couldn't be happening, not here, not now. She raised her flashlight, its beam a meager defense against the encroaching darkness. The light flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like demons unleashed. The air grew thick, heavy with the weight of centuries of despair. The stench of mildew and decay intensified, assaulting her senses, choking her. Clara gagged, her stomach churning with a primal fear that threatened to consume her entirely. Clara knew with a chilling certainty that she couldn't stand there and wait to be consumed by whatever darkness was closing in. She had to act, to fight, even if it meant facing her doom head-on. She lunged toward the door, her shoulder slamming against the solid oak. It wouldn't budge. The shadow doppelganger let out a low, guttural laugh, the sound scraping against her nerves like claws on a chalkboard. It was a sound devoid of humanity, filled with an ancient, bone-chilling malice. Clara slammed her fist against the door again and again, the wood bruising under her desperate blows. Pain shot up her arm, but she barely registered it. She whirled around, her eyes frantically searching for another way out. The windows, she realized with a sinking heart, were nailed shut. The glass covered in layers of grime and cobwebs. Trapped. Like an animal caught in a snare, she was at the mercy of a predator far more cunning, far more powerful than she could ever hope to be. Tears of frustration and terror welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision. No, she wouldn't give up. She wouldn't let this be the end. Clara searched for anything, anything at all that could be used as a weapon. Her gaze fell on a heavy, ornate candlestick perched on a nearby table. It was a grotesque thing, wrought in the shape of a snarling gargoyle, its eyes two ruby-red stones that seemed to gleam with an inner fire. Clara lunged for it, her fingers closing around the cold, smooth metal. The shadow doppelganger tilted its head, watching her every move with an unnerving curiosity. It was toying with her, Clara realized, savoring her terror. It wanted her to fight back, to make this a game. And for some reason, some primal instinct for survival, she was determined to play. Clara gripped the candlestick tighter, its weight oddly comforting in her hand. She raised it above her head, her body trembling with fear and adrenaline. "Stay back!" she shouted, her voice hoarse, echoing in the silence of the room. The shadow doppelganger didn't move, it simply stood there, its eyes burning into her, a cruel smile playing on its lips. The air around it seemed to crackle and pop, a physical manifestation of the malevolent energy emanating from its very being. Clara felt a surge of defiance welling up inside her. She might be trapped, she might be terrified, but she would not go down without a fight. As Clara prepared to charge, a voice cut through the oppressive silence. It wasn't the whispering voices from the walls, nor the guttural growl of her shadowy double. This voice was different, calmer, sadder. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through the room, reverberating through Clara's very bones. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end, a primal fear gripping her heart. Yet there was something in the tone of the voice, a note of sorrow, of desperation that gave her pause. "Clara," the voice whispered, her name a sigh on the wind. "You shouldn't be here. This place, it's not safe." Clara lowered the candlestick slightly, her eyes darting around the room, searching for the source of the voice. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The shadow doppelganger shifted, a low growl rumbling in its chest. It was clear it didn't want her to listen, to engage with this new presence, but Clara couldn't help herself. This voice, it felt different, familiar somehow, like a long-forgotten memory trying to resurface. "Who are you?" Clara asked again, her voice stronger now, the fear giving way to a cautious curiosity. "And what do you want?" The voice sighed, a long, mournful sound that seemed to echo the sorrow of the house itself. "I want to help you," the voice whispered, "but you have to trust me. You have to leave this room now." Clara stood frozen, caught between the tangible threat of her shadowy double and the disembodied plea of the unknown voice. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to fight, to escape the suffocating terror of the room. But the voice, there was a sincerity in its sorrow, a desperate urgency that gave her pause. She glanced between the menacing figure of her doppelganger and the empty air from which the voice seemed to emanate. One promised pain, the other, what? Hope? Salvation? Could she trust a voice in this haunted darkness, a voice that felt strangely familiar yet utterly alien? The shadow doppelganger sensed her hesitation, a flicker of annoyance crossing its features. It took a step closer, its form shimmering as if composed of smoke and shadows given a malevolent life of its own. "Don't listen to it," the doppelganger hissed, its voice a raspy whisper that seemed to claw at the edges of Clara's mind. "It lies. It wants to keep you here, trapped in this darkness forever." Clara's grip tightened on the candlestick, her knuckles white. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "What do you want with me?" The doppelganger smiled, a chilling, predatory expression that sent shivers down Clara's spine. "What do you think?" it purred, its voice a grotesque mockery of her own. "I am you, or rather I am what you could become. Stay here, Clara, and embrace the darkness. Let it consume you, make you whole." The voice echoed in her mind, softer now but no less insistent. "Don't listen to it, Clara. It will destroy you. You have to trust me. Trust yourself." Clara closed her eyes, her head spinning. Trust. That's what it all came down to. Could she trust a voice she couldn't see, couldn't explain, or would she succumb to the seductive whispers of her own darkness, the promise of oblivion offered by her twisted reflection? Taking a deep breath, Clara made her choice. She didn't know where the voice would lead her, what dangers might lie ahead, but she knew she couldn't stay here. She couldn't let fear paralyze her, couldn't give in to the insidious whispers that threatened to consume her sanity. "I'm not afraid of you," Clara said, her voice stronger now, the tremor gone. She opened her eyes, fixing her gaze on the shadowy figure before her. "I don't know what you are, but you're not me. I won't let you win." The doppelganger snarled, its form flickering, its rage palpable. "You're making a mistake," it hissed. "You'll regret this, Clara. You'll regret it for eternity." Ignoring its threats, Clara turned her back on the doppelganger, shutting out its presence, its promises, its threats. She focused on the voice, the feeling of sorrow and hope intertwined, and took a step toward the unseen. As soon as Clara made her decision, the room shifted again. The oppressive weight that had been crushing her lifted, the air becoming lighter, easier to breathe. The shadows that had seemed so menacing moments before retreated, shrinking back into the corners, their power waning. The voice guided her, a faint whisper in the darkness, leading her through a maze of hallways she hadn't noticed before. The mansion, once a labyrinth of fear, now seemed to shift and change around her, revealing hidden passageways, secret rooms, as if the house itself was aiding her escape. Then, as quickly as it started, it was over. Clara stumbled out of a hidden doorway, concealed behind a dusty tapestry, into the cool night air. She gasped, taking deep breaths, her lungs burning with the sudden influx of fresh air. She had escaped, but as she turned to look back at the imposing silhouette of Blackwood Manor, she knew the experience had changed her. The darkness she had encountered, the terror she had faced, had left an indelible mark on her soul. She thought she was there to uncover the secrets of Blackwood Manor, to expose its darkness to the light of day. But what she found was something far more profound, far more terrifying. She found a reflection of her own inner demons, a darkness that resided within her, as it did within the very walls of the manor itself. Clara never wrote her exposé on Blackwood Manor. The words wouldn't come, the horror too personal, too profound to translate onto paper. The experience had shaken her to her core, leaving her with more questions than answers. She left journalism behind, her thirst for truth now tempered by a newfound understanding of the darkness that lurked not just in haunted mansions, but within the human heart. The whispers, however, never entirely faded. They lingered at the edges of her awareness, a constant reminder of the fragile line between sanity and madness, between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Blackwood Manor still stood on the windswept cliffs, a brooding testament to the darkness that haunted its halls. Some stories, Clara realized, were meant to remain untold, some secrets best left buried. For some truths, once unearthed, could never be forgotten, their shadows forever staining the soul, and the haunting of Blackwood Manor, she knew, would stay with her always. A chilling reminder of the darkness that lay hidden beneath the surface of the world, waiting for the unsuspecting soul to stumble upon its secrets.